Hi everyone and welcome to Exploring the Build. I'm Alex and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. Today, we are back in 2026 with the first Unearthed Arcana of 2026. We're going to be looking at the newly released Mystic Subclasses, and we'll be taking specifically the Oath of the Spellguard Paladin that was released in the Unearthed Arcana in order to create, like the title of the video suggests, a Templar character. I'll be taking inspiration from the Dragon Age series, particularly Dragon Age Origins, since that's my personal favorite of the series as a whole. Now, of course, a little disclaimer, this is using Unearthed Arcana and brand new Unearthed Arcana at that, so it's probably not going to fly at all tables if you are actually looking to play this type of character at a table, but as a little thought experiment or just to see how we could do it and what the new Unearthed Arcana does offer, I think it'll be fun to go through and look at this character build. I will leave all my thoughts on the actual subclass as it stands currently in the Unearthed Arcana form until the end in the summary. So, with all that said, let's jump into the character build. Starting off the character build in character creation with our origin, we are going to be a human. Not really changing it up too much for the sake of this build as it's presented. As a human, we're going to get that extra origin feat right off the bat, but we're also going to take a custom background in order to get the ability score boosts that we want and pick the origin feat of our choice. Now, I'm sure there are probably some backgrounds that could translate pretty well from Origins into D&D and make us feel like a member of a Templar order, but a custom background is going to go that little extra mile and also let us have freedom of choice. Our origin feats from being both a human and also getting the custom background, we are going to take Magic Initiate Wizard and Spellfire Spark from the new Heroes of the Forgotten Realms book. Let's go over Magic Initiate Wizard first. With Magic Initiate Wizard, we gain a little bit of spell casting. We gain 2 cantrips from the wizard spell list, and we also gain 1 spell of our choice that we can cast once per day for free. The spell admittedly doesn't really matter, given that A, we can change whatever the spell is when we level up, and B, we have a free casting of it, and we can use the spell with any other spell slots we have. You could say, gain shield, get a free casting of it once per day, and then also use your paladin spell slots. We're not really going to have to worry about that though, because we're going to gain shield from the Oath of the Spellguard subclass anyways, so we can pick any spell we want. For our cantrips though, these ones are a little bit more important. We're going to take True Strike as well as Blade Ward for our 2 first cantrips right off the bat, and we honestly might not even switch those out, though we have the options to if we wanted. Next, Spellfire Spark. Spellfire Spark is a new feat that is fairly anti-magic in and of itself, or at least we can flavor it to be that way. The other thing about Spellfire Spark is that I really like how we could flavor this as a lyrium type origin rather than D&D's Spellfire in order to reflect the more Dragon Age theme, though really what we're going for is the anti-magic effects that the feat has in it. For starters, we gain Magic Absorption. Magic Absorption says that once per turn, when we would take damage from a spell, we can just flat out reduce that damage by 1d4. We can't use this benefit if we are incapacitated, but there's no other limit or restriction on it. We just get to reduce damage from spells and magical effects by a d4 completely passively. Very neat and very Templar-esque. The other ability is Spellfire Flame, which gives us the Sacred Flame cantrip, and allows us to cast it as a bonus action a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus. We also get to choose whether we're using Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma for our spellcasting ability of the spell when we gain it from this feat. So we're going to pick Charisma since obviously as a paladin we are a Charisma caster. Finally, for our stats, from taking custom background, we're going to gain a +2 to our strength and a +1 to our Charisma. We could make this more of a full charisma focused character if we wanted to, and I might mention a little bit more about that later in the video, but for the purposes of just walking through this build and sticking to the Dragon Age roots, we're going to go strength first and charisma as a very close second. So, with all that said, for our stats, we're going to end off with the following array of ability scores: 17 strength, 8 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 16 charisma. Jumping into the level breakdown now, we're going to take a very broad overview of this character build, just looking at each tier of play. For us, tier 1 is going to be levels 1 to 5, tier 2 is levels 6 to 10, so on and so forth. Mainly looking at it this way because there isn't too much of a build on this. We're actually going to just be a full 20 level paladin, mostly because it'll be neat to see what a full paladin can do with the new subclass. Starting off in tier 1 though, we're going to gain our first feat, the subclass itself at level 3, a fighting style right away at level 1, as well as spellcasting and spellcasting abilities, such as Paladin's Smite, which gives us a free casting of Divine Smite, and then we end off at level 5 with extra attack, as well as Faithful Steed. So first off, let's talk about that fighting style, as well as our weapon masteries. Now the way I see it, there are quite a few options on how we could go about doing this. Since I want to stick with that Dragon Age roots, I'm tempted to use either a greatsword or a longsword, given that those are the weapons most commonly used by the Templars in the Dragon Age games. There is a good argument to be made for a polearm, given that a lot of the Oath of the Spellguard Paladin's abilities seem to work based off of your reach, which means that a weapon with a bigger reach is going to be better overall. But for this, we're going to ignore that and just go with a mastery of a greatsword and a longsword. Make no mistake though, they're both actually pretty good to have. Both of them work well with our Spellguard strike feature. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but whether it's the defensive sap mastery of the longsword or the more offensive damage-focused graze mastery of the greatsword, both of them can combo really well with our Spellguard strike. For the fighting style, we're probably going to go with dueling if we're using a longsword, or defense if we are using a greatsword. For the sake of this video, I'll say that we are going with a greatsword, and we'll take defense as our fighting style in that case. So, now it's time to look at the actual subclass that we get, and what this new Oath of the Spellguard offers us. The first thing we get is the feature Guardian Bond. This is one of those protection-based abilities where we create a bond with an ally, and as long as that ally stays within a certain distance, in this case our reach, so right next to us, we can use a reaction when they get hit by an attack in order to increase their AC by an amount equal to our charisma modifier, potentially turning that hit into a miss. This is our channel divinity option, so we do have limited uses of it, but for what it's worth, it does last a full hour once we do pop it. Most of the time, we're probably not going to want to worry about it too much, given that we'd be giving up our reaction to increase our allies' AC by just a little bit for one attack. There is actually one instance where this feature can be quite good, and that is for mounted combat. However, with Paladins in 2024, we gain at level 5 the Faithful Steed ability, which just gives us the Find Steed spell, always prepared, so we can always have a mount. Just because we always have a mount does not mean we're always intended to be a mounted character. Also, that we might not gain mounted combat-oriented feats, such as Mounted Combatant. We can use Guardian Bond to put a bond on our mount, and then protect them in a pinch if we really need to. Now, getting to Spellguard Strike, what I would consider the more core feature of this Paladin subclass. Spellguard Strike says that when we see a creature that is also within our reach cast a spell that uses components, we can use a reaction to make an attack against that creature. The trick here is that it is a reaction, so it means we're giving up our Guardian Bond, our casting of shield, or any other reactions, or even just a regular opportunity attack to do it instead. As I talked about in our weapon masteries, we can give this a little bit of a boost depending on the weapons we are using. With the greatsword that I said we picked, graze means that no Spellguard strike will ever go wasted. If we get the opportunity to actually make this reaction attack, even if we miss, we'll still deal some damage and potentially trigger other things from feats that we're going to pick up later on down the line. Meanwhile, if you wanted to go more sword and board, grabbing the longsword and actually landing that Spellguard strike can be extremely effective if the enemy is trying to hit you with a spell attack. Going on from both of those level 3 features, at level 4 we get the choice of our first feat, and of course we're going to round off our strength with none other than Mage Slayer, the most appropriate feat for this anti-magic Templar character. Mage Slayer doesn't really do much to boost our damage, but it does give us an automatic save on an Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma saving throw. And we also provide disadvantage to any enemy casters or creatures that are concentrating on some sort of spell or effect. Beyond that, the last two features of Tier 1 are, of course, Extra Attack and Faithful Steed. Going up to Tier 2 now, levels 6 to 10. Here we gain Aura of Protection, Aura of Concentration right after at level 7 from being an Oath of the Spellguard. We'll gain our next feat at level 8, and then at level 9 and level 10, we'll gain Abjure Foes, followed by Aura of Courage. That's a lot of auras. First up, at level 7, we get the Aura of Concentration from being a Spellguard. This says that we and our allies that are within our Aura of Protection have advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration. This can be a really nice buff, especially for us, since we as a paladin do like having concentration spells up. It doesn't really help our allies too much unless we are trying to be that bodyguard who sticks right next to our spellcaster allies. We're going to want to find some concentration spells to really work with this feature. Of course, we have the classic paladin go-to Shield of Faith if we wanted to burn a spell slot to increase our AC by +2. But we also picked up Blade Ward from Magic Initiate Wizard. Blade Ward is an interesting choice because it's a cantrip that does take an action to cast, so it would require a little bit of setup at the beginning of combat. But for what it's worth, when we have it up, this Aura of Concentration coupled with Aura of Protection would allow us to increase our AC by 1d4 whenever an enemy tries to attack us, and if they do happen to hit us, we gain advantage plus our Aura of Protection bonus on the concentration save to keep Blade Ward up. Basically, it's very unlikely that we would ever lose Blade Ward once we do have it going. So the action investment for this cantrip isn't as heavy of an investment as it might be for someone who could just lose concentration right away. Going up to level 8 now, we gain our next feat, and here we are going to increase our charisma by +1 with the new Spellfire Adept feat. This is the improvement of Spellfire Spark from Heroes of the Forgotten Realms. It requires us to have the Spellfire Spark feat, or at least have spellcasting or pact magic already. So we could have grabbed it on its own, but honestly, Spellfire Spark was so cool for our character with the anti-magic subtracting a d4 that I really wanted to grab both of them. We gain 2 features beyond just the ability score improvement, and those are Fueled by Spellfire and Searing Spellfire. Searing Spellfire says anytime we deal radiant damage, we ignore enemy resistance to radiant damage. That's not going to pop up too often, I don't think, but when it does, we'll be very thankful we have it. Fueled by Spellfire, on the other hand, says that once per turn, when a spell we cast deals radiant damage, we can use up to 2 of our hit dice in order to roll and add the total to our damage of that spell. This is absolutely fantastic if we want some extra burst damage on, say, our Divine Smite, since we can get 2 extra d10 on top of the d8s that we would already be pumping in when we land a successful hit. If we aren't wanting to use Divine Smite because we are out of spell slots or we want to save those spell slots for shield or something else, then we still have our bonus action castings of Sacred Flame. So we can walk up to an enemy, we can attack them twice thanks to extra attack, we can then bonus action, use Sacred Flame, and if that spell also lands, add an extra 2d10 on top of the cantrip's damage. Going up to tier 3 now, levels 11 all the way up to 15. Right away at level 11 we gain Radiant Strikes, so our basic weapon attacks now deal an extra d8 radiant damage, which is always a good bonus. We gain an extra feat, our Restoring Touch Paladin ability, and we also gain the Spellbreaker Blade Spellguard subclass ability. First, let's really quickly go over our feat. Now that we have our strength at 18 and our charisma is an odd number at 17, it's time to increase our constitution. Realistically, we could probably go in any direction we want, whether that's capping strength, increasing our charisma to improve our aura of protection. But given that we didn't take tough because I elected for Magic Initiate instead of tough, we don't really have that many hit points and we don't have a great constitution score. So it's probably better if we spend our next 2 feats in a row to up our constitution starting at level 12. There is another slight meme option we could do, but I'll mention that after I talk about Spellbreaker Blade. Spellbreaker Blade says that after we hit a creature with our Spellcast Strike feature, we can immediately cast Counterspell as part of the same reaction. We did get Counterspell from our subclass spell list, so we have it innately anyways, but this just allows us to cast the Counterspell for free without actually giving up our action economy, assuming we can actually get Spellguard Strike off. The other nice bonus here is that if we do cast Counterspell on the enemy, but we fail to actually counter their spell, we don't use a spell slot, so we can just save that for the next either actual Counterspell moment or Spell Strike opportunity. Finally, going up to Tier 4, the final tier of play, level 16 to 20. At level 16, we get another feat, and as I said, we probably want to increase Constitution, but there is one other little meme we could pull off if we so chose. We also get our aura expansion at level 18, meaning that 10-foot aura of protection, concentration, courage is now 30 feet. And it actually provides a very nice bonus since we have the distance on that aura to back up the buffs we're giving our allies. We have an interesting choice of Epic Boon at level 19. There are a plethora of options that could work, but there is one that I think that stands out, at least in my mind, for flavor, for the anti-magic Templar, a bit better than others, though realistically you could pick any Epic Boon that is your favorite if you actually got to level 19 and probably have a good time with it. And finally, we get that level 20 Paladin subclass capstone, which of course we will go over as well. But first, the meme back at level 16. If you actually got your Paladin to level 16, and you had a weapon such as a Frostbrand or something that dealt cold damage, or wanted to invest in the Elemental Weapon spell, which isn't that great of a spell, but could work, I would actually recommend picking up Coldcaster of all things. Again, a new feat from the Heroes of the Forgotten Realms book. Coldcaster would allow us to round off our charisma to 18 here instead of just bumping our constitution again. It would also give us the Ray of Frost cantrip, but it would also give us the Frostbite feature. Frostbite says that once per turn, when we hit a creature with an attack roll and deal cold damage, we can temporarily negate the creature's defenses. That creature then must subtract 1d4 from the next saving throw they make before the end of our next turn. The reason this is actually kind of good for our Spellguard Paladin, and also a bit of a meme, is because of Spellguard Strike. If we were actually able to pull off Spellguard Strike and land that hit against an enemy that was casting a spell within 5 feet of us, dealing that cold damage and having Coldcaster on it would allow us to immediately apply the D4 penalty to the enemy, and we immediately get to follow up that attack reaction with Counterspell thanks to Spellbreaker Blade. Going from that final general feat to our epic boon, here I'm going to suggest, of all the epic boons we could pick from, the Boon of Spell Recall. Boon of Spell Recall allows us to improve our charisma, but it also gives us the free casting ability. Free casting says that anytime we use a spell slot of 1st to 4th level, we can roll a d4. If the number we roll is the same as the level of spell slot expended, we don't actually use that spell slot. This is really powerful for us because as a paladin, we're a half caster, so we only ever get up to 5th level spell slots anyways, so the majority of spell slots we're going to be using are 1st to 4th level. Not only that, it would mean that every single time we cast Divine Smite or Shield, since we have that on our spell list, we have a 1 in 4 to just not use the spell slot. A really fun interaction though is again from Spellbreaker's Blade. We get the ability to cast Counterspell as part of the same reaction. If the enemy succeeds their save on the Counterspell, we still get to keep the spell slot. But now, if the enemy doesn't succeed their save against our Counterspell, there's a 1 in 4 that we still get to keep the spell slot anyways. So we have even more potential for counterspelling those pesky spellcasters later on down the line. Finally, let's talk about that subclass capstone really quickly, the Eternal Spellguard. Eternal Spellguard says that as a bonus action, we can empower our aura of protection, making it an even better 30-foot radius aura. Empowerment lasts for 1 minute or until we end it, and we can't use the feature again until we complete a long rest or spend a 5th level spell slot. Honestly though, it actually might be worth that 5th level spell slot. And the reason it might be worth it is because when we do empower our aura, we gain the following benefits. Bodyguard says that if we do have a target of our Guardian Bond feature, they just gain resistance to all damage. Note that they don't have to be within our reach, and we don't have to trigger the Guardian Bond's reaction to let this happen. It's just a passive effect as long as we have the bond up. So we can now finally bond one of our spellcaster allies and go do our thing while they sit at the back of our aura, resistant to all damage. Speaking of resistant to all damage, we also gain protection from magic. We and all of our allies in the aura gain advantage on all their saving throws against enemy spells. And the last part of the ability is Spell Ward. Any ranged spell attacks against us or allies within our aura are made with disadvantage. Okay, that's it. Really, we are a Templar, at least in my mind. We have a very, very nice spell list that is also very flavorful too. Throwing out anti-magic stuff, like we could cast Dispel Magic with our action to just break any ongoing spell effects. So have Counterspell on our spell list, and built into our actual subclass features in a way that doesn't reduce our action economy. We do have a bit of a bodyguard theme as well, though it's not as strong since it's tied directly to our reach. So that means that we probably would mechanically want to grab like a polearm or some other type of weapon or feature that allows us to extend our reach if we were really trying to optimize it. We're also very charisma heavy since Guardian Bond and all of our spells rely on charisma as our spellcasting trait. So if you did want to, instead of Magic Initiate Wizard, grab Magic Initiate Druid, pick up Shillelagh, and just go full on Charisma Paladin, I wouldn't blame you. It's probably another more optimal way to go. For me though, the ability to grab those Spellfire abilities, throw them in, and have them act as extra anti-magic flavor is just icing on the cake to finally live that Templar fantasy and bring in a character that feels a lot more like a Mage Slayer than just what the Mage Slayer feat gives them. Overall, I do think the subclass is very interesting from a flavor perspective. There is probably some tuning up and refinement that could be done on it, but let me know what you think. And let me know what you thought of the build as well. What would you add or change to get closer to the theme of a Dragon Age Templar? And do you like the Oath of the Spellguard as it currently stands? Or what changes would you make to make it a bit more interesting than it currently is? Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.